DoorDash girl, as many have taken to calling her, has been arrested because she attempted to stand up for what she believed to be her rights. Is she right? Is she wrong? Is this real life? Is this just fantasy? Well, we know at least this much. DoorDash girl has been caught in a landslide of legal trouble, and there's no escape from that reality. Barring that, you might be surprised to believe that I'm not 100% in agreement with anybody on here on the totality of the circumstances. DoorDash girl actually does have some ground in this case. What's up, guys? Acerthorn here, and this is my latest hot take on some internet drama. Okay, so let's recap the matter just for the two of you who don't have a clue what's going on. So on the night in question, I forget the exact date, but that's not important. The important thing is that this DoorDash girl, whose real name is Olivia Henderson, she mentioned that she prefers to be called Liv, so that's what I'm going to call her during this video, is Liv. Basically, she was a DoorDash driver, and she got an order to deliver some food to somebody else's house. She named him Austin in her video, although she never gave a last name. And when she actually arrived at his house, she had instructions from the customer to leave the food at the door. Not to knock, not to enter the house, just to leave it at the door. And when she got there, she placed the food down, but then she noticed that the resident of the home, Austin, was basically asleep on his couch, unconscious, and he was naked. He was wearing a shirt, but that's all he was wearing. His dick and balls were visible to her, and so Liv was understandably grossed out. I think her TikTok page heavily implies that she's a lesbian, if not outright says it. But even if she were straight, she's not dating him, so he had no right to just flash her like that. At least from her point of view. This is basically her. At this point, I'm speaking exclusively from her point of view. I'll make some judgments in a little bit, but right now, I'm just talking about what she likely thought. Anyway, she was of course grossed out by this, so she pulled out her phone and started recording. And as she walked away, she just basically flipped the camera off and said, "That's fucked up." Now, the video has been removed from TikTok, though it has been reposted to the subreddit r/TikTok cringe. I will post a link to that that reposting of the video in the description of this one. So, in order to basically put that man on blast and teach him a lesson about basically just flashing his dick to women who didn't ask for it, she turned around and posted that video to TikTok, where it was promptly removed because it was nudity, it was pornography, which is against TikTok's community guidelines. And even before it got removed, suffice it to say that it backfired on her is putting it mildly. Basically, if anybody was on her side, it was very few and far between. It was completely eclipsed by the waves and waves of people who thought that she was basically just doxing a man for being naked in his own home, which he had every right to do. There was even some people who started rumors that she had the door was only open a crack, and she had opened it all the way herself just to see him naked, which would make her 100% at fault.
But question, why did you change your story? Because originally she had said that the door was open a crack, and now it was just wide open.
There was never any proof of that, but that's what some people were starting to claim. And as if that were not enough, she had DoorDash itself, in addition to terminating the customer's account, they also terminated her account, basically firing her. And according to Liv, we have no records of this. There's never been any screenshots posted or anything like that. So it's basically just her word. But according to Liv, they didn't even tell her the reason. She even got on the phone with the support team, and they couldn't tell her the reason for her termination, and she had to go through with appealing the termination without any idea as to why she was terminated. Now later, after she made a big stink about it, DoorDash's own social media account, I don't know if it was X or Instagram or whatever it was, but they basically made a public statement explaining that they fired Liv for posting the video online and thereby effectively doxing Austin. So that is DoorDash's official statement as to why they fired her. So, naturally, as you can imagine, this pissed Liv off something fierce. So she made a separate video where, and this time she didn't just say that's fucked up. She was just screaming bloody murder, just histrionic fits of anger, explaining how this is so unjust. She was sexually assaulted. Like, literally, she literally just said she was SA'd, which in modern day social media language means she was sexually assaulted. It doesn't mean something always, it means sexually assaulted. For those of you who are heavenly not very big into social media viral videos like that. And basically, her exact words were, and this is the most viral clip of this second video, her exact words were,
"This is a man's world! I'm the victim!"
So, at this point, nobody is at least nobody that I've noticed, is taking her side at all. Everyone and their mother is literally just being like, no, this is completely not how you are not the victim. This is very clearly a case of him just being naked in his own home, which he had every right to be, and you just went ahead and put him on blast for what you considered to be SA, and no, you're just completely full of it, Liv. That's basically everyone's position that I've ever noticed. One person whose name is Emily King even took it a step further, and she even played a portion of this follow-up video that isn't nearly as viral as her screaming, "I'm the victim," but she actually pointed out how Liv was also pissed off that her video had gotten tons of views, and TikTok would have had to pay her for those views, except that they determined, and from her point of view this determination was entirely arbitrary, that her video violated community guidelines. So they got out of having to pay her by their own self-determination. And Emily King actually has the balls to say that this is proof that she didn't even care about the essay itself. She only cared about the clout. She only cared about getting paid for the viral video.
Interesting, first of all, that she gets way more upset about the fact that she might not get her payout because of her story, rather than being way more upset about the actual trauma that she is accusing this man of causing. That's the problem that I have.
We'll get to that in a minute. We'll put a pin in that in a minute. But for the time being, the important thing to note is that her attempts to double down on being the victim backfired horribly. And everybody else is doubling down in insisting that she's the culprit. So, it all came to a head sometime in mid-November when the police of whatever town she was in, it was in New York State, but I don't think I don't know the town though. It is way too there's not nearly enough population density in the clip that she showed for it to be New York City, and outside of New York City, it's actually a pretty damn rural state. You'd be surprised to hear that because New York City and all. But aside from that one city, New York State is actually a pretty rural state. Don't believe me? Just go and get the populations and the areas for both New York State as a whole and New York City. Subtract New York City's population and its area from that of New York State as a whole, and then divide that up, and you can get the population density for the rest of New York State. It's actually surprisingly rural. Anyway, the important thing is that Liv was arrested and charged with not one, but two felony counts. And as far as the legal case is concerned, that's all we're currently at. She hasn't had her trial yet, so we don't know if she's going to be convicted on both, convicted on one, acquitted on the other. We don't know if she's going to be acquitted on both. We don't know if she's going to take a plea deal or what. But the important thing is that right now she is currently being charged with two felony counts, and those two counts are for, if memory serves, I think it is for, and in future Acerthorn, if I'm wrong about this, post a clarification on screen, for felony surveillance and then felony dissemination. The surveillance is for her having taken the video in the first place. And the second, for the dissemination, is for her turning around and posting that video on TikTok. So, to those people like on Kiwi Farms or whatnot who say that doxing someone isn't a crime, yes, that is literally Kiwi Farms' official position. And I'm gonna post a screenshot of that on screen right now just to prove it. It's insane. That site is so fucking sadistic. So for basically anyone who thinks that, who takes the position that doxing someone isn't a crime, take a look at that and get back to me. So that's basically where we are at the moment as far as this ongoing viral controversy is concerned. Now, before I actually give my 2 cents on the matter, I want to start off by definitively debunking some common misconceptions about the matter. The first one I hinted to earlier is that the door was only open a crack, and then she actually opened it all the way to reveal his naked body. There is absolutely no evidence for that. At all. Okay, surprisingly, these videos have been taken down, but there's a famous TikToker named Yuval the Terrible. He actually had a secondary account called Yuval the Not So Terrible, and he actually posted these videos to that secondary account, but they have since been taken down. Where he basically put what I believe to be the kibosh on this theory that she opened the door herself. There was never any video where the door was only open a crack. There was never any video where she said that the door was only open a crack. There was never even a comment from her saying that she opened the door and that it was originally only open a crack. He pointed out that this controversy has gone so viral that if such a thing had ever existed on the internet for even a few minutes, someone would have downloaded or screenshotted it and would have preserved it. He offered a cash prize of up to $1,000 to anyone who could show definitive proof of any of the videos or comments, unedited, where the door was only open a crack and she opened it the rest of the way, and nobody was able to take him up on the offer. And basically, so I just want to say, I'm not going to offer a cash prize to anyone, but I definitely want to see some original primary evidence, not somebody else making a comment saying it, but actual straight from the horse's mouth evidence, either commented on by Liv herself or uploaded by her, that straight up that actually explains that the door was only open a crack and she opened it the rest of the way. I don't think you're going to be able to find that. So until I see something like that, then as far as I'm concerned, it never happened. Deal with it. The next misconception I want to debunk is the one I mentioned earlier about Emily King claiming that Liv only really cared about the money. No. Let me break this down for you so that you can truly understand just how asinine her logic is. By her logic, I mean Emily King's, not Liv Henderson's. Alright? Emily King's logic is that, well, DoorDash girl mentioned the money in one sentence in less than 5 seconds of her 2-minute video, therefore that's all she ever cared about. Are you starting to see the problem here? Emily, honey, I follow you on both TikTok and YouTube. I love your content, but in this one case, you're full of shit, okay? In this one case, your logic is fucked up. She spent the better part of 2 minutes. She spent a good solid minute and a half, if not more than that, screaming about how she was essayed. But then she mentions getting paid by TikTok once! And that not only proves that it doesn't just prove that she cared about that too. No, it proves that that's all she cared about at all. Emily, take a look in the mirror. Ask yourself sincerely, do you even believe that yourself? Alright, moving on. So the next misconception that I want to debunk is actually one where I actually disagree with Liv herself. She says that she was sexually assaulted, that she was essayed. I wholly disagree with that. Like, even if we were to assume that Austin had committed some sort of crime, even if we assumed that he was criminally negligent in some way, or that he was civilly negligent in some way to end up flashing her, but even if we assume that there might be some sort of blame to be placed on Austin, that blame does not rise to the level of SA. And to explain to you what I mean, let me explain this. A lot of people on social media, namely the women and the pick-me men, tend to label anything that is even remotely in the outer perimeter of sex as sexual assault, as long as the person it happened to was made even a wee bit uncomfortable from it. People tend to speak in outright histrionic terms over being even slightly grossed out by anything that is even remotely sex adjacent. People, just a short time ago, there were people, it was a common thing on TikTok and other social medias to label a man as a sexual predator. A literal sexual predator. Just because he was looking in a woman's general direction at the gym. Like, not even in the women's locker room, but just working out on the machines. And his eyes were just basically pointed in that direction, and he would get labeled a creep and a pervert and even a sexual predator. Even though, like, honey, you were in public. People have the right to look at you. These men weren't even saying anything, they weren't doing anything, they were just looking at you. And you labeled them as a predator for that. Okay, no, and to be fair, there is some merit to labeling something as something deplorable, even if it isn't full-on rape. Like, to show you what I mean, let me play a clip of a fairly old video, a couple of years old, from a TikToker named The Warrior Philosopher, where he takes a lot of people to task for their attempts to try to pass off sexually predatory behavior as not rape. You'll listen to what he has to say, and you'll probably can at least see where he's coming from, even if you don't agree with him 100%. All right, here we go.
So you don't know a single man who doesn't know rape is wrong. I mean, not something they're likely to be open about, I would think. You're not like introducing your friends at a house party, be like, this is Jessica, she's a yoga instructor, love her. This is Steve, he sexually assaults people, he's really into it, interesting guy. That's Tom, he's a Jets fan, but we don't hold that against him doing it. Of course, you're never going to find somebody who will openly say rape is not wrong. Across the board, all of society's unanimously agreed it's wrong. What you will find is a tsunami of gaslighting and bullshit about whether or not what happened was in fact rape. The more the issue is reduced and oversimplified and framed as the extreme and rare cases where it's a complete stranger in a dark alley with a gun to your head, the more the definition of rape is narrowed and constricted, and the harder it gets to meet the criteria. All of a sudden it gets a lot easier to justify the actions and say, well, that guy's not a rapist, he would never do that, he knows it's wrong. All he did was not take no for an answer from his own girlfriend and continue to pressure her and try to make her feel like a horrible person if she didn't do it, until she felt unsafe and decided to just get it over with because she thought something worse might happen if she did it. People need to know that it's still rape even if you didn't do it in a dark alley with a gun to her head.
So you can see where he's coming from. Like, he kind of has a point, but I disagree that he's 100% right. You see, this case right here is a perfect example of where there definitely needs to be some distinction between rape and less serious crimes. Because a lot of people are taking Austin's side, but even if he might have been, to some extent, guilty of some kind of sexual criminal behavior, it still didn't rise to the extreme level of sexual assault. To explain to you, to help illustrate this problem, I have to ask you, what is sexual assault? And to answer that question, we need to in turn ask ourselves, what is assault? Now, in the legal sense, assault is basically when somebody does something that puts you in imminent fear of being physically attacked. So, like, if somebody throws a punch at you and it misses, that's not a battery, but it is an assault. If somebody points a gun at you, even if he's 20 feet away, it's still assault, because as long as he pulls that trigger, that bullet's you're not gonna have to get time to get out of the way of the bullet. But in order for it to be an assault, you have to actually be in legitimate, reasonable fear of being batteried. So if we take that definition and then turn around and ask ourselves, what is sexual assault? Then that means that in order for an act to constitute sexual assault, that means that Liv, in this case, would have to have been put in reasonable, it has to be reasonable, imminent fear of being raped. Or at least sexually contacted in some way that she doesn't consent to, if not full-blown rape. And that's where we fall short of the mark here, because she is not, in the original video, we can clearly see she is not, actually in fear of him leaping off the couch and coming to, try to hold her down and rape her. Like, she walks away when the camera actually turns to her, we can see that she's fully composed. Contrast that with the scene in 2002's Spider-Man, right before Mary Jane does the upside-down kiss. Remember the upside-down kiss? It was iconic, it was romantic, it was all that good shit. But remember the scene immediately before that happened? She was basically running away from a trio of... there is no other way to put it. They were rapists. Full-on rapists. Even in the strictest pro-man sense of the word, those guys were rapists. Even though they never physically touched her, it is clear from anyone in MJ's shoes that she would have been in fear of being raped by their actions. Therefore, it qualifies as assault and therefore qualifies as sexual assault. But unlike Liv Henderson, who was fully composed, grossed out by what she saw, but still maintaining her composure, it's MJ in that scene is absolutely in a full-on panic, as she reasonably should be. Who wouldn't be in a full-on panic in that sense? But that alone demonstrates the fundamental difference between what Austin did, if he did anything illegal at all, and what Liv described it as, which is SA. Now, by contrast, if she had knocked on the door, and he opened the door, and he didn't have any pants on, and his dick was visible, yeah, that would have been as sexual assault, because in addition to him having no plausible deniability regarding his criminal intent in that case, because he necessarily would have knowingly flashed his dick to her, the key word there being knowingly. In addition to that, in such a case, they would be standing on opposite sides of the door within arm's reach of each other. So she had even if he didn't do anything besides flash her, she obviously would have been put in a reasonable fear of him doing more than that. Because if he's close enough that he's able to take the food from her, as would be the case if he had answered the door after she knocked, then he's close enough to actually grab hold of her and try to rape her. So even if he never did anything other than just answer the door naked, he still, the closeness in such a case would have put Liv in reasonable fear of being raped. So in that case, yes, it would have amounted to sexual assault. But in the case that actually happened in the real world, he was passed out on his couch, admittedly naked, but she did not fear that she was about to be raped, as evidenced by the fact that she had clearly maintained her composure while filming. So that is the third misconception that I feel needed to be debunked. That even giving DoorDash girl every benefit of the doubt, and it's clear that even if what happened to her was fucked up, it still wasn't SA. And the fourth and final misconception that I want to debunk here is, did she actually dox Austin? Now, I understand that she posted his first name in her video. She said she admitted in the original video that his name was Austin, but she never gave his last name, and she certainly didn't give his address. So that does beg the question: does giving their first name alone qualify as doxing someone? It's a touchy subject. I'm not even gonna straight up debunk the matter here. The only thing that I'm debunking is that it's a slam dunk case to say that she doxed him. She never gave his address, although some people were able to use the outside of his home, a front lawn, his front porch. Some people were able to use that to find the home on Google Maps and figure out his address from there. Does that? But I do not. If that's the only way that anyone knows the address, then I'm siding with Liv on that one. That she did not leak his address there. And to show you what I mean, you remember Keffels? Somebody who for a time actually had Kiwi Farms taken offline. You remember that? Well, I'd like to point you guys to this little news article that reported on the news story when it happened, and more specifically, I'd like to point to this little excerpt here, which basically says that some people on Kiwi Farm, when she went into hiding, when she retreated to a hotel to just get away from Kiwi Farms' users swatting her, some people on Kiwi Farms found out what hotel room she was staying at solely by noticing the patterns of the quilt on the hotel room's bed where she was staying at. They used that as a means to find the exact hotel room that she was staying at. So that begs the question, does that mean that Keffels doxed herself because she voluntarily broadcast to the world the clues that ultimately led to her being doxed, being found? Where no, fucking hell no. That is bullshit to say that Keffels basically doxed her fucking self. So applying that logic to the instant case, the case of Austin's home being doxed, if the only reason his address got leaked is because other people used the front porch to actually find the address on Google Maps, I'm sorry, but that is not Liv's fault. So no, fuck you. If all she gave was just Austin's first name, then maybe there might be some doxing, but even then it's clearly the absolute bare minimum, and she has quite a bit of plausible deniability in that regard. So, now that I've debunked all of those misconceptions, let's actually talk about Austin's plausible deniability. Basically, he was passed out drunk on his couch in his own home. If the door was closed, there would have been absolutely nothing wrong with that. You have the absolute right to be naked in your own home. However, the door was open. Did Austin know that the door was open? There is absolutely zero evidence of that. That is the game changer here. It all hinges on whether or not Austin had criminal intent. He obviously must have known that his dasher was a female. Although I don't think, it honestly wouldn't have mattered. Even if the delivery driver was a man, if he had intentionally exposed himself, if he had intentionally flashed his cock, even to a man, that still counts as criminal intent. But the important thing is, there is no evidence that Austin knew the door was open. For all we know, it could have been blown open by the wind. So that alone is what gives Austin a legal defense to any indecent exposure charge. It's actually not the fact that he could only see, you couldn't, now a lot of people think that you couldn't see him unless you actually entered the house. So Liv had to literally trespass into his home in order to see him. That is not true, and I'm going to get into that in the next section. Go into more detail in that into the next section. So really, I think the only real difference here, the only real game changer here, is whether or not there is any evidence that Austin knew that he could be seen from the doorway. That is the important thing, because, and let us not forget, that I strongly believe across the board, male, female, white, black, red, green, blue, orange, I don't care, I wholly believe in the concept of innocent until proven guilty. So, until you can show me evidence that Austin knew that the door was open when he fell asleep on his own couch, then he has plausible deniability for any crime, whether it be sexual assault, indecent exposure, literally anything. Even if it's just a misdemeanor, there's insufficient evidence, from my point of view, to convict him of even that much. So, yeah, Austin gets the stamp of not guilty from me, at least for the time being. So, now here's the part where I actually start to take Liv's side a little bit. Not the debunking of the misconceptions, because at that point a lot of people don't believe any of those misconceptions, but they're still definitively on Austin's side 100%. Like, for example, the vlogger known as Santagaskar, I was actually relieved that he didn't actually accuse her of having the door open a crack. But he still took Austin's side completely. Here's where I actually start to actually defend Liv directly. Because she does actually have a tiny amount of plausible deniability, at least insofar as the surveillance charge is concerned. Now remember, the surveillance charge is her simply taking the video in the first place. The dissemination charge is her reposting it on TikTok. Those are two different charges, and at least for the surveillance charge, I think her lawyer could actually have a case that they could advance to, at a minimum, get a lighter sentence, maybe? But hopefully this all makes sense. So anyway, first of all, there's the matter of the visibility. As we established, the door was in fact wide open when she arrived, or at the very least there's zero primary first-hand evidence to contradict her assertion that the door was wide open when she first arrived. A lot of people try to argue that she had to the only way she could have, even though the door was open, the only way she could have seen the penis is if she had actually entered his home in order to actually get, in order to see something that she couldn't have seen from the doorway. That is not true. I'm posting the link to the archive of the original, and we can clearly see that she is standing definitively outside the door, looking in. And admittedly, it's from an angle, but she's clearly shown standing right next to the food, and then she just pans her phone up to show the man lying naked. So she was standing in the exact spot that she was supposed to be standing as a DoorDash driver, and from her point of view, the penis was clearly visible. Okay, a lot of people think that even if the door was open, even if it was wide open, in order for her to see the penis, like, let me show you, like, here, hopefully this will help. This is basically a floor plan. I don't know how accurately reflects Austin's home, but bear with me. A lot of people seem to think that Austin was basically like sitting on the toilet and she had to walk like a full 5 paces through his living room and then turn another corner in order to see him with his dick out. Or at the very least, that he was basically like pressed against the wall, like pressed against the front door wall, and that in order to see his dick, she basically had to come in and take a U-turn in order to get the shot she needed. But that is not how it happened at all. The original video clearly shows her standing definitively outside the door, and she didn't even have to do any sort of weird angles in order to get the dick shot. So, there is that. Now, how does this work in her defense? And how does that give her even an arguable reason to start filming? Well, because it definitely demonstrates that at the very least, she had the right to be upset. Whether or not, like I said earlier, whether Austin had committed a crime is entirely dependent on whether or not you can prove he did it intentionally, which I don't think we can. We certainly don't have any evidence currently, and I don't think there's ever going to be any evidence of that. But at least from Liv's point of view, she still had the right to be upset and offended. So let's think about this from a woman's point of view. Not just Liv's, but from any woman's point of view. Suppose she wanted to go to the police. Let's ignore the unlawful dissemination charge for the time being. That's where she reposted it to TikTok. Let's look only at the unlawful surveillance charge for the time being, and give her the benefit of the doubt that she intended to go through the proper channels to have this man held legally accountable. Okay? How was she supposed to... how do you expect her to prove her case if she doesn't have evidence? Like, at that point, at least from her point of view, she had to film it at least a little bit just to make sure that nobody could accuse her of straight up making it up. You know, a lot of people, one of the biggest reasons why women don't go to the police to report their rape is because they fear not being believed. And I'm just going to give an example. I have no idea where the original video is. This was months and months ago that I saw this on my FYP, so I have no idea what the original video was. But basically, it was a story of how a rape victim had managed to actually use her smartphone, had turned her video recording on her smartphone, and in doing so was able to catch her rapist in the act of raping her. And this wasn't just a passed out on his couch accidental flashing. No, this was a full-on capital R rape. Like, she was screaming, she was resisting, he was holding her down, everything that there was no way any sane person, even to the extent that I disagree with the warrior philosopher on how there needs to be a series of terms to describe different levels of sex crimes. Even in that case, there was no way you could possibly describe this man's actions as anything other than just capital R rape. And yet, not only did he not get charged, but the woman got charged with unlawful recording because the man didn't know or consent to being recorded. And so not only did she get charged, but they didn't even prosecute the man, the rapist, because, well, the evidence was illegally obtained, so it was inadmissible. And I'm sorry, but unless you were just a full-on rape apologist, unless you just believe that rape shouldn't even be illegal at all, there's no way you can describe that as anything other than fucked up. So, turning again to the case of Liv Henderson, I can very readily accept that she probably felt like she needed to do at least a little bit of recording in order to have evidence to prove her case against Austin, so that nobody can accuse her of making it up. So, to that very limited extent, I can agree that I think her attorney could probably put together a pretty decent case in her defense, if not to get her off, then to at the very least get shown clemency in her sentencing. And the last thing I'm going to take Liv's side on is the way DoorDash fired her. Now, we need to make this clear that we have no evidence that Liv is actually telling the truth. She never posted any screenshots of her termination, or she never recorded her call with DoorDash's support group, where they refused to tell her the reason for the termination. Everything we know about the circumstances surrounding how she was terminated is entirely her word against DoorDash. But if she is telling the truth, that she was fired for no reason was given as to her firing, then I'd say that's pretty suspicious on DoorDash's part. They turned around and posted publicly on social media that they fired her because she doxed a customer. Okay, if that was the real reason that you fired her, and it wasn't just you noticing that was the direction that social media was currently trending towards, and you decided you were going to roll with that instead, if that was the real reason you fired her, why didn't you just say that the first time? The fact that you were so silent about your reasoning for firing her, honestly, it just feels like you were kind of ashamed, you were kind of afraid to admit the reason, and only when social media gave you the idea to say that she doxed Austin, only then did you decide to adopt that as your reason. Which, honestly, that sounds kinda like unlawful discrimination and even retaliation. Like, you really did fire her just for reporting her sexual assault. And it was only when social media gave you a pretext that you could use, only then did you jump onto it. Because if it was anything other than that, then I'd like to know why you didn't say that in the first place. And why did you only say that publicly after she put you on the spot? It's just a little bit sus if you ask me. So that transitions me to the final point here, where we discuss the unlawful dissemination charge, the actual reposting of the video to TikTok, and this is where I cannot defend Liv at all. Liv, if you're watching, or if her attorney is watching, this is something you could probably tell her to help your client understand the severity of the matter. Here's the thing. Liv, you are a vigilante. By reposting the video to TikTok, you essentially took the law into your own hands. See, there's this... Some people seem to think, like, social media has made it easier than it has ever been in the history of mankind to shame and publicly humiliate people who do what you consider to be a bad thing. So a lot of people have this delusional belief that unless they're engaging in full-on lynch mob violent levels of brutality, then they are not. Then they don't qualify as vigilantes. But that's not the case. You didn't physically engage in an act of violence against him by posting the video online, but your intention clearly was to put him on blast, to use the viral spread that TikTok can provide as a means to shame and humiliate him, and you're doing that to teach him a lesson. Guess what, Liv? That is vigilantism. It's not lynch mob levels of violence. It's not even really violence per se, but it is still taking the law into your own hands because you're trying to punish him. You're trying to teach him a lesson by subjecting him to an unpleasant experience in order to deter that sort of behavior in the future. Guess what? That's punishment. That's literally the definition of punishment. And you are going outside of the police and the court system to inflict that punishment. Therefore, it is extrajudicial punishment. And therefore, you are taking the law into your own hands. That's literally what taking the law into your own hands means. And to be fair, and this is the closest I'm going to get to defending Liv on the dissemination charge here. To be fair, it isn't 100% her fault that this sort of behavior has become surprisingly normalized in our culture. Social media has made it easier than ever to extrajudicially punish someone while remaining anonymous. That doesn't mean that what they are doing is legal. It just means that it's going to be a lot harder to hold them accountable. As I explained in my video about cyberbullying and defamation not being okay, it has become surprisingly normalized in the 21st century. But does that make it right? And as I said in that video, it's only normal because people like them are normalizing it. And I even compared that to a small business owner having to deal with shoplifters to demonstrate how both are fucked up, both are morally fucked up. And the only difference is that one will garner almost universal sympathy for the victim of the crime, whereas the other is surprisingly normalized. But it's only I still believe that Liv is 100% at fault for actually pursuing this course of conduct in this instance. But she, as well as a lot of other people, have been brainwashed to think that this sort of behavior is okay by dint of it being normal, but it's only normal because people are choosing to normalize it. We need to stop this. We need to stop siding with people who post videos to put individuals on blast just because that person, the person holding the phone and recording it, is personally made a bit uncomfortable by what the subject of the video is doing. Like, it is ridiculous to think that it's okay to just use what is essentially a cyber perp walk to basically teach that person a lesson. And what I mean by that, here's an article from the New York Times all the way back in 1994, back when police perp walks were commonplace in New York City, where basically as the minute they arrested you, the news media would come along, and before you even had your trial, they would just put you on display for journalists to photograph. And so they can then run a smear story about how you were caught doing this or that. In the year 2000, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which has jurisdiction over the state of New York, declared this perp walk unconstitutional for this very reason, because it's basically just extrajudicial punishment. It's basically the police punishing you before you've even had your day in court. And in addition to that, here's a 1994 article from the New York Times condemning the perp walk, and here's a little snippet for you. Is there any redeeming social value to the perp walk? Well, it does perform some social functions. A community shaken by an act of deviancy wants reassurance that moral order has been restored. And a perp walk accomplishes this much more quickly than the courts can. But then, so does a lynching. The walk can also serve to provoke an emotion that is otherwise alien to the city, or in this case, the internet: shame. For one brief moment, the perp loses the city's/internet's protective anonymity and feels like Hester Prynne, the moral claustrophobia of a righteous community. Puritans can argue that this is good for the perp's soul, but let's not pretend like we're doing it for his benefit. The perp walk is for everyone else. It honors the influencers, drives views and algorithmic boosts and likes, and entertains the public, all at the expense of a person who is supposed to have the presumption of innocence. And that is basically what all of these videos, like what Liv was trying to do, basically amount to. They're just cyber perp walks. All you're trying to do is just make him suffer, either for your own, if not for your own sadistic pleasure, then at the very least to teach him a lesson. But that's not your place, Liv. It's not your place to punish him like that. If you've got a valid claim, take it up with the police, take it up with the courts, take it up with your employer by asking them to terminate his account and at the very least refuse to ever deliver to his address ever again. But what you did was you basically took the law into your own hands and basically hoped that people would find out who he was and send a whole bunch of hate and death threats his way. That's basically what you did, Liv, and that is not okay. And it's not okay when anyone else does it either. We need to actually we need to stop normalizing this shit. The reaction that everyone had with Liv posting it on TikTok, in this case, that needs to become the default reaction to anyone posting videos of other people without their knowledge or consent in order to extrajudicially punish them for perceived wrongdoing. Alright? This shit has to stop. So, that was my belated take, on the whole DoorDash girl controversy. I wanted to wait until I actually understood I didn't want to just ride the hype train. I wanted to actually make sure that I had a fairly decent understanding of exactly what was going on before I ran my mouth. So if that means I end up losing views because I was late to the party, so be it. I'd rather that than risk just outright defaming someone. Because I've been through that and I know how that feels. Anyway, that was my take on the matter. If you liked it, be sure to like the video, subscribe for more, and be sure to post a comment. I need algorithmic content in order to get views, in order for my channel to grow. In the meantime, however, I am Acerthorn, and I will see you guys next time. Peace!